Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video for EVE Online. And in today's video we're going to be going through the Gallente ship names and what they all mean. Now, some people have suggested that I even did the Amar version ahead of the Gallente. Does that mean I've really gone off the Gallente? No, it's just there was that much research that I had to do for the Gallente one because so many of the names I just had no idea where they came from. This actually means this is probably my favorite of these because it's been the most interesting to research and there is so much to talk about in this one. Like, seriously, so many ships, so many different representations. A lot of these come from things like Mesopotamia, Abyssyria, there's Celtic mythology, Greek mythology, there's Latin. It's kind of all over the place. Lots of sort of ancient mythology, I think, is probably the unifying theme through a lot of these. And there are also, what I would argue, some of the worst ship names in EVE Online. But we'll get to that later. If you do enjoy this, please let me know, hit like on it, drop a comment down below letting me know which is your favorite Gallente ship. Those things really help the channel out by saying to YouTube, I like this content, please show it to more people. If you do want to go the extra mile to support me financially, check out my PayPal tip jar and my Patreon page. If you're new to EVE Online, you can get 1,000,000 free skill points by clicking my referral link, and that gives me a little bit of a kickback as well. And come join the Cat Skull Community Discord to chat with a bunch of like-minded EVE Online players who'll be more than happy to help you out with any questions you may have. Now, this is going to be a long one. There's going to be no flashy graphics, so kind of treat it like a podcast. With all that said and done, let's jump right into talking about the Gallente Federation's names of all of their ships. And good lord, for this one, I need to have my notes handy because, again, so many of these things, I just didn't know about these. The common running theme through the Gallente Federation's naming is that they're all ancient mythology. To a certain degree, there are a couple that are here and there that are just words from dead languages, like Latin and things like that. But a lot of it is mythologically, wow, that was a sentence, mythologically based. That's where we're coming from. So there's a lot to cover. Let's jump right in with the Corvette, the Velator. Now, Velator, to the best of my understanding, just comes from the Latin verb of velo, or velum, meaning a covering, a conceal, or a cover. You can conceal something, and like veiling, that's where the word veil comes from. This to me seems like a really interesting name. It's an unusual one for sure. Does it really fit the ship? I don't know. I mean, veiling and concealing does suggest kind of, covert ops, but I guess it does work with the remote sensor dampeners that you're kind of concealing your ships from their scanners. I don't know, maybe. Moving on to the frigates, navitas. Again, we have another Latin word. Now, navitas is promptness, zeal, or great and persistent toil and effort. Which, yeah, persistence and promptness definitely fits the theme of a remote armor repairing frigate. I get it. I mean, admittedly, the logistic frigates were originally not logistics frigates. They were more like used for mining and things like that, if I recall. I don't remember if it's the logistics or the explorers that were originally used for that. But either way, promptness, zeal, great and persistent toil and effort in Latin. Tristan, really interesting one, and I want to just briefly talk about the lore of EVE Online coming out of the story of this video, and just talking about the Tristan in general. Now, interestingly, the Tristan in EVE also has the nickname the Fat Boy, and this comes from a really unusual place. Basically, it was the joint effort of two different designers in the Gallente Federation, and one of those designers, just one day, completely disappeared. And yeah, there were investigations into it, and oh, Lord no, the guy's just disappeared. It turned out several years later that actually the other designer had killed him and eaten him, which is where the term Fat Boy comes from. Yeah, fun one, that. Anyway, Tristan. Tristan itself comes from the Celtic word of dristan, and this means riot or tumult. There was also a knight in the Arthurian legends, so King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, of Tristan there. And also in Celtic mythology, there is the story of Tristan and Isolde. Now, Tristan there was a Cornish knight and was asked to escort the Irish princess of Isolde for King Mark of Cornwall. Now, during that time, the two of them drink a love potion, they fall madly in love, and this is kind of where the Tristan story comes from in Arthurian legend, that you've got Tristan, Guinevere, and Lancelot kind of in this love triangle. I don't know where that fits into things with the Tristan as a ship name, but it's interesting, right? Or at least it was interesting to me. I'm going to say now, a lot of this stuff I'm going to say, oh, that's really interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me. It might not be interesting to you, but hey, you're watching this video, so I kind of hope it is. Moving on to incursus. Incursus, again, is a Latin verb. This is the concept of running against or dashing against something, colliding, assaulting, attacking, an onslaught, if you will. And again, that seems to really work for the brute force that is the Incursus frigate. Get it up close, hit them with blasters, stay alive thanks to your armor repairer bonuses. I like that one. It's simple, but it's effective. Immicus, also known as the ugliest ship in EVE Online, or at least one of them. We'll talk about the others later. Immicus, interestingly enough, when I was researching this, the first thing I found for Immicus is a rock band from the UK, from Luton in London. I've not actually listened to any of their stuff, don't know if they're any good, but it was a nice little aside there. Now, in Latin, inimicus means not friend, and that comes from the root of imicus and in. This means technically imicus means friend, but it's not really used in Latin as friend from what I can gather. I didn't really study Latin that much, so someone can probably correct me there, but the only word I could find that had imicus in it was inimicus, meaning not friend. Therefore, if in is like insolvent, invaluable, that kind of thing, meaning the opposite. I know invaluable means like, you know, it's beyond value, but in English as a prefix usually is used to negate something. So inimicus means literally not friend, imicus therefore meaning friend. Beautiful little name for an explorer, I suppose. Please don't shoot a friend. Literally. Atron. Persian or Iranian, it's just a name. I couldn't find any mythological links to this, but it's just a Persian or Iranian name, which translates as Guardian of Fire. I kind of thought that when I saw that as a name that maybe there was some mythology behind it, but I genuinely couldn't find anything. If you can, I mean, I'll be interested to read more, but Guardian of Fire. Not sure it fits. I mean, it kind of does. Guardian of Fire sounds awesome. Kind of feels more like a logistics vessel, though. You're the Guardian, but the Protector? I don't know. Finally, then, for the Tier 1 frigates, we have Maulus. Now, this is an absolute bastardization of Latin. There is no word or anything that is Maulus. There is, however, Latin malus, which means bad or harmful. It's where mal comes from in words like maladjusted, and it's where malice comes from as a concept in the British language to, you know, be malicious. That kind of thing comes from Latin malus, meaning bad or harmful, and maulus appears to just be a misspelling of that. And this seems to be a running theme with the Gallente stuff, which is why I say they've got some really quite dodgy names, but we'll get to those later. We then have the Comet for the Federation Navy standard stuff. Obviously, we've got the Immicus and the Maulus there, but Comet is the only one with a new name. Now, obviously, everyone knows what a comet is. It's a big ball of ice flying through our solar system or the universe with a long tail behind it. We've seen, you know, if you're at all familiar with astronomy, you'll know what a comet is. But I thought it was interesting to note that in Latin, cometa means long-haired, and that's where we get the name for a comet, because it's got that long tail behind it, like a star with hair. I thought that was kind of sweet. Moving on to the interceptors, we have the Tyrannus. Now, this is the Celtic god of thunder, and interestingly, it's actually the root of the word thunder. Basically, that Celtic of Tyrannus, when it moved into Germanic, became Thoranas, which then becomes Thunar, and then eventually Thunder. And thus we get thunder from the Celtic word Tyrannus, meaning the god of thunder. I like this. It's a really cool name for a ship. It's an interesting little interceptor. And I learned something, that Tyrannus was a Celtic god of thunder, and it's where we get the word thunder from. Moving along, we have Ares, Greek god of war and courage. This should be pretty obvious for anyone who has a faint passing understanding of Greek mythology. But yeah, Ares was the Greek god of war and courage. Probably should have been an assault frigate more than an interceptor, but it works. It hits things, right? Up to the assault frigates, talking of which, we have the Ishkur. This was the Mesopotamian god of rain and thunderstorms, often depicted as a great bull. Now, interestingly, when I did a lot of research into all of this, there were so many notes that I could have made on all of this kind of stuff. This video would have stretched into hours if I told you everything that I found interesting about these different gods and their mythologies. So I'm kind of glossing over a lot of it. If you do find yourself going, oh, I'd like to learn more about that, Wikipedia, it's your friend, right? I didn't just go through Wikipedia for this. Believe me, there's a lot more effort than just Wikipediaing every word on here. A lot of this stuff doesn't appear on Wikipedia at all. But Ishkur, Mesopotamian god of rain and thunderstorms. So we're kind of going with the same theme as Tyrannus here, which kind of makes me think this should have been the Ishkur and Ares should have been the Ishkur, if that makes sense. Ishkur should have been the other interceptor, and the Ares should have been the assault frigate. Then we have Enyo. Enyo was the Greek war goddess, sometimes also literally referred to as Eris. Eris and Enyo in certain Greek mythology are two separate goddesses. In other bits of Greek mythology, they are the same. And how fitting would that have been if it was the Ares and the Enyo, the two Greek god and goddesses of war? I don't know. That to me would have made more sense for both the assault frigates to be like the war goddesses and both of the interceptors to be lightning, rather than one lightning interceptor, one war interceptor, one lightning assault frigate, one war assault frigate. I kind of wish that it was the assault frigates were the Enyo and the Ares, and the interceptors were the Tyrannus and the Ishkur. Again, might just be me. Moving up to the covert ops, we have Helios. Now, in Greek mythology, Helios was the god of the sun. It's also where we get words like heliocentric, the model of our solar system where the sun is at the center of it and everything orbits around it, rather than the previously held geocentric belief where everything orbited around Earth. So Helios, Greek god of the sun. Fits for an explorer, I think. It's, sort of this big, bright, ugly thing in the middle of space. I don't know. Then we have the nemesis. And again, nemesis is one of these words I think almost everyone is familiar with. Your nemesis is your enemy, right? It's not strictly true. That's more common usage. And nemesis is technically the thing that will bring about your downfall. And certainly that is literally where the name comes from. Nemesis was a Greek goddess who personified retribution for the sin of hubris. And hubris is arrogance against the gods themselves. And the root of this word is nemein, which is to give what is due. Which seems fitting. And certainly for a stealth bomber, that thing that will bring about your demise for having too much hubris, yeah, that works. For the electronic attack ship, we have the Kyries. Now, in Greek mythology, Kyries were female death spirits, a spirit for the violent death and battlefield death, that kind of thing. Interestingly enough, in Greek mythology, the Kyries cannot actually kill themselves. They just have to wait for you to die and then feast upon your corpse. Kind of fitting for the E-War frigate, I guess, that it doesn't really kill you. It waits for everyone else to kill you. No bonuses for damage or anything, right? It's purely warp scramblers, remote sensor dampeners. It's all about just waiting and then feasting on your corpse afterwards. Yeah, kind of cool. They're the daughters of Erebus and Nyx, which, spoiler alert, are other ships we'll be talking about later on. At the top, then, we have the logistics frigate, the Thalia. Now, in Greek mythology, Thalia was one of the 3 Graces and one of the 9 Muses. So when she was one of the 3 Graces, she was the grace of joy and abundance. When she was one of the 9 Muses, she was depicted as a giggling, uplifting woman with a jeering expression, wearing an ivory crown and boots. Interestingly enough, one of the few that actually wears boots rather than just being barefoot. This to me kind of works. It's a logistics vessel, so being a giggling, uplifting woman with a jeering expression and joy and abundance works. You're a healer. Moving on to the destroyers, things get different here. So first of all, we have the Algos. Algos in Greek mythology literally translates as pain. There were 3 Algaea. Algos is the singular, Algaea is the plural. These were Lupe, literally pain, Akos, grief, and also where we get the word to ache, and Arnia, sorrow. These were the children of Eris. Again, spoilers for in a few moments' time. So Algos being literally pain, yeah, for a destroyer, that works. Then we have the catalyst. Now, a catalyst is something that precipitates an event or change. In chemistry, it's also a substance that speeds up or improves a reaction without itself being destroyed in the process, like we get catalytic converters in cars and things like that. But its official meaning of catalyst is something that precipitates an event or change. And if you see 30 catalysts warp onto you in a mining belt, yeah, there's definitely an event about to happen and something is about to change. Namely, your mining ship is about to become scrap. This comes from the Greek term of katalein, meaning to pull down or destroy, and that definitely feels apt in terms of what this ship is primarily used for. This takes us up then to the Eris. Now, Eris was the Greek goddess of strife and discord. Sometimes, again, Enyo and Eris were literally the same god. In other bits of Greek mythology, they are separate entities. She was the mother of the three Algaea, the three Algos. Also, the largest known dwarf planet in our system, 3 times further from the sun than Pluto is. This is an interesting little aside for me personally because, yeah, people talk a lot about how Pluto was demoted and how unfair that is and how awful it is. Thing is, we demoted Pluto because it was the easier of the 2 options. If you insist on calling Pluto a planet, then you have to change the definition of what a planet is, and suddenly most of Jupiter's moons, most of Saturn's moons, and most of the Kuiper Belt objects all become planets too. Eris would be a planet, for example, if Pluto was still a planet. You would end up with anywhere between like 180 to 250 planets in our solar system. So yeah, do you want to learn 250 planets in primary school and keep Pluto, or do you just want to cut Pluto from the list and focus on the 8? That's the argument. Moving up the destroyers, then we have the command destroyer, the Magus. Now, Magus is a Persian word. It's a member of a priestly caste, often a sorcerer or magician. We see Magos used often in like mythology and in role-playing games. Mage. This is where mage comes from. It's actually also the root of the word magic. Magus, magic. Now you know. And certainly the ability to teleport, a fleet 100 kilometers in a direction thanks to its boosh, I'd call that pretty magical. At the top of the destroyer list, then, we have the tactical destroyer, Hecate. Not Hecate, Hecate. Sorry, there is no disambiguation here. This is a word that is still in use in Greek mythology. Hecate, not Hecate. Hecate. Greek goddess of magic, crossroads, ghosts, witchcraft, necromancy, this kind of stuff. A lot of interesting stuff about Hecate, a lot of really cool mythology there. I won't get into in this video or be here for hours just talking about Hecate. But yes, definitely worth a look into if you're interested in Greek mythology at all. Very cool. And certainly works for a ship that can change its modes. Crossroads, magic, yeah, that works for something that can shift between those different modes. As for ghosts, necromancy, yeah, when a Hecate like hot drops onto you, warps onto you super quickly and activates its polarized blasters, yeah, ghosts and necromancy definitely comes to mind. Moving on to the cruisers then. First of all, we have thorax. Really boring name for a ship here. It's just a Greek word that means breastplate, cuirass, or corselet. Basically a piece of armor worn on the chest. In modern biology, we also use the thorax to talk about just the chest and ribcage area. That is your thorax. Used also in like talking about insects, having a thorax or a prosoma and things like that as well. But yeah, pretty boring one here for a tanky ship, I guess. Yeah, wow. Then we come across what is actually one of the funniest named ships in the game. Vexor. I always thought of this as something that would vex, something that would impede and slow you down, which always struck me as weird because it doesn't have bonuses to anything like Web of Fires or, any of the E-War. Therefore, that would work quite nicely for an E-War ship. It's not the root of the word vexor. A vexor in Latin comes from the word vexo, meaning to shake, swing, move, or vibrate, etc. So the vexor literally means something that shakes, swings, moves, and vibrates, which is just freaking hilarious. I love it. I love it. It's the vibrating ship. You heard it here first, folks. Then we have the single most boring named ship in the entire game. Also, probably the ugliest ship in the game. Like, I don't normally do this in these videos, but let's actually just take a moment to open this up. What the hell is this? It looks like a fish that swallowed a banana. It looks like a pregnant woman with her hand on her hip. It looks like a vacuum cleaner, a Dyson vacuum cleaner with a sidecar. It has a random port egress on the back that looks like one of those cheap little gaming controllers that you buy on Amazon. It's just the ugliest ship in the game. I'm sorry, if you like this vessel, how many times were you dropped as a child, and how much have you smoked since then? Ugliest ship in the game by a long shot. Like, there is literally no skin that can save this, because it is just the most hideous looking hull in the entirety of EVE. Anyway, it's also the most boring named ship in the entirety of EVE. It's literally the Latin word meaning of the heavens or of the sky. Yeah, it's a spaceship. Well done. Congratulations. You win the award for the most boring name of a spaceship ever. Finally, for the Tech 1 cruisers, we have the Execra. Now, the Execra comes... Again, this appears to be a misspelling. As I said, like with Malus coming from Malice, Execra seems to come from Execor. There's no R in it. It's not R-O-R, it's just the Q-U, then straight into O-R. And Execor means to attain, to arrive at, to carry out, execute in the non-violent sense, like you execute a program or execute an order, that kind of thing, not execute a person. It just means to carry out, do the thing, which I guess for a remote repairer ship, you do the thing. You are then Execor. Wow. Then we come to the recon ships. Again, some of the ugliest ships in EVE. Lachesis, not Lachesis, Lachesis. It's Greek. This is one of the three fates who decided where a soul went after death. The three fates decide where the souls go after death. If you've watched Disney's Hercules, they're the three women who share a single eye. Now, Lachesis is the measurer of the thread of life. She was said to appear 3 days after a baby was born to decide how long that child would have of life in general. And so she's the one who measures the length of your life, the length of your thread, and during the actual act of cutting that thread, she's the one who draws it out and holds it taut. Then we have the Arazu. Again, hideous-looking ship. This is the Babylonian god of construction and craft. Now, Lachesis makes sense. Decider of fates. Thing that has remote sensor dampeners, warp scramblers, warp disruptors. It pretty much decides your fate in PvP, right? The god of construction and crafts? What? Something that's about building something and you've made it a PvP ship? I don't know. I really don't understand. I suppose you construct a sinusoidal beacon with it? Does that qualify? I don't think it does. Crap named ship. Moving on. Heavy assault cruisers, Ishtar, also Inanna, Mesopotamian goddess of love, war, and fertility. Fertility makes sense with the drones. War makes sense with the fact that it is a heavy assault cruiser. Goddess of love, I certainly love to hate this vessel. It works. Then we have the Deimos, not Deimos, not Demos, Deimos. This was one of the sons of Ares and Aphrodite, the personification of fear, in this case, dread. Also, one of Mars's 2 moons, which may or may not be moons, they might just be asteroids that Mars has kind of captured into a sort of orbit. This is one of the interesting things we're actually looking to discover in cosmology at the moment, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Deimos, son of Ares and Aphrodite, personification of fear, this time in the form of dread. That creeping fear that comes at you from within. This is in stark contrast to Phobos, which is the other son of Ares and Aphrodite, and Mars's other moon. There are 2 of them. If you've played Doom, then you've got the Phobos and the Deimos bases in the original classic 1995 Doom game. But yeah, Phobos is the personification of fear in the form of panic. It's also the root of the word phobia. So when you talk about a phobia, that's coming from the word Phobos, the son of Ares and Aphrodite, personification of fear as panic, whereas Deimos was the personification of fear in the form of dread. We then come up to the logistics cruisers, the Oneros. Now, the Oneros is the Greek personification of dreams, kind of your Morpheus, god of dreams and dreaming, which kind of makes sense, perhaps, with Remote Armor Repairer. I dream that I will survive this fight. Make it so, Oneros, please. Finally, then, we come to the strategic cruisers, the Proteus. Now, Proteus is, again, from Greek mythology. This was an early prophetic god of the sea, rivers, and other bodies of water. Literally, Homer describes him as the old man of the sea. Now, what I found hilarious and really quite fitting about this is Proteus can tell the future, but often chooses to change his shape to avoid doing so. Which makes sense, because the Proteus has subsystems which allow you to change its shape. And if you're flying the Proteus with the Smart Bomb fit, you can certainly tell the future of any little frigate that you come across. It's also interesting that Proteus is also the root of the Greek word protos, meaning first. And considering he was pretty much one of the first gods in Greek mythology to actually be spoken about, kind of makes sense. Moving down into the battle cruisers, Brutix, really boring one here that you can probably guess. It's a Latin pseudo-linguistic bastardization, like Maulus, meaning malice, like some of these others just not being spelt correctly. Brutix, it's literally from the Latin brute. They've just added ix on the end. There is no instance of Brutix existing as a word outside of Eve. Now, in Greek, ix is often used as a feminine title, as in something like, we're going to talk about dominatrix here, aren't we? You can see where that comes from. To dominate, an ix on the end. So, female brute, maybe. There's no history of this word outside of EVE Online. It's just brute that's been bastardized to look Greek. Now, brute works. It is a brute, but again, freaking boring name, CCP. Come on, you have so much mythology to come from, and that's where you go. Then we have a Myrmidon. Now, if you play role-playing games, Myrmidons tend to be a class of warrior, usually spear and shield and stuff like that, sort of a protector class. Unusual then that it's a drone battlecruiser. However, that's what I thought. Then I started looking into the actual history of the term Myrmidon. Now, originally, the Myrmidons were legendary inhabitants of Thessaly in Greece. They were known for their fierce devotion to Achilles, the king who led them in the Trojan War. Now, Myrmex also means ant in Greek. Now, this is an image that invokes small and insignificant workers mindlessly fulfilling their duties. And suddenly, this makes sense in the term of a drone battlecruiser, doesn't it? Swarm of little ants doing their work mindlessly, that's a drone. Then we have the Talos. Now, in Greek mythology, Talos, also spelled Talus or Talon, was a giant automaton made of bronze, and it was designed to protect Europa in Crete from pirates and invaders. It also shares a root with the word talon, meaning, obviously, claw. Bit of an interesting one, this. I suppose, yeah, being an automaton designed to protect something. I don't know, Talos kind of feels more like it would have been the command battlecruiser or like a logistics vessel, logistics cruiser, but Speaking of the command ships, we have Astarte. Now, I thought Astarte was going to be some kind of warrior because I have obviously played a lot of Warhammer 40,000. I used to work for Games Workshop, so Adeptus Astartes, I assumed, meant some kind of warrior. Interestingly, Astarte was actually an ancient Near Eastern goddess of love, fertility, and war. Literally the proto-version of Ishtar. Yeah, not anything to do with big, scary warriors armed with bolt guns. Actually, love, fertility, and war. Put that one in your hat and eat it, Space Marine. Literally, Ishtar. We've already had Ishtar over here. Nope. We've already had Ishtar over here. I get Ishkur and Ishtar confused all the time. Literally the same thing. Ishtar and Astarte, same god. Then we have Eos. Eos, the Greek sister of Helios, goddess of the dawn. Not really much to say here. I did go through her entire story, looking to see if there was anything that might, sort of tie in with command bursts or drones. Nope. Just the Greek goddess of dawn. It's literally that simple. And if you're going to have the Helios as an explorer, then Eos kind of feels like it should fit a similar kind of niche. I don't know. Feels a weird one. But again, this ship tree is just chaotic. It's all over the place. You'll notice a lot of these I haven't really stopped to talk about whether or not I agree with them, because there's too much to say. And most of the time, the answer is just no. Hyperion, again, Greek. One of the Titans, originally imprisoned by Uranus beneath the earth. Now, Hyperion was the father of Helios, Selene, and Eos, or Eos. Essentially, Hyperion was the Titan of the sun. Helios, his son, was the god of the sun. Selene, his daughter, was the goddess of the moon. And Eos, his other daughter, was the goddess of the dawn. Being a Titan, being this powerful feature in Greek mythology, makes sense for a really tanky battleship, I suppose. Other than that, not much to say. Megathron is where things get really interesting, because again, Megathron is a word that doesn't actually exist outside of EVE Online. It could be Megatron, which is a freaking transformer, but I don't think it is. I think it's the other way around, that this should be Metatron. Essentially, in Judeo-Christian, in the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Metatron is an Abrahamic angel. Enoch becomes an angel in the Old Testament. Enoch, whose flesh was turned to flame, his veins to fire, his eyelashes to flash of lightning, his eyeballs to flaming torches, and whom God placed on a throne next to the throne of glory, received after this heavenly transformation the name Metatron. Yeah. If you think of angels as being those sort of white-cloaked humans with wings and halos, screw on. The Bible never describes them like that. Literally, that is such a crap depiction of angels. Angels are burning fire, multiple eyes, horrors from beyond Lovecraft's worst nightmares. I mean, read that again. This Enoch, whose flesh was turned to flame, his veins to fire, his eyelashes to flashes of lightning, his eyeballs to flaming torches, and whom God placed on a throne next to the throne of glory, received after this heavenly transformation the name Metatron. Basically, the dude bursts into flame and lightning. That's terrifying. Interestingly as well, if you've read His Dark Materials or watched the BBC series, Metatron is the regent of the Kingdom of Heaven who essentially usurps God, usurps the authority. Nothing of that really in the Bible, but he is kind of like God's right-hand man, I guess, ish, which works for a really powerful battleship. Then we have the Dominics. After all that awesomeness of Enoch and Metatron, we come to, again, a really crappy named. It's either based on dominatrix, meaning something, a female that dominates, or we come to the root of the name Dominic, meaning belonging to God or belonging to the master. It's also the root of the word dominate, I guess, to be the master of. So Dominix, something that dominates. Wow, CCP did well on that one. Then we have sin. Okay, I give up. This should be an Amarian ship. Hands down, we're talking about religion, right? Sin, a transgression against divine law or the law of God. Now, each culture has its own interpretation of what it means to commit a sin. While sins are generally considered actions or thoughts, words, or an act considered immoral, selfish, or shameful, harmful, or alienating, all these kind of things tend to be termed as sinful. That's it. There's nothing special I can say about this. Like, you had all of mythology to go with and you went for an Amar name. As I said, I hate this ship tree with its name. I love it and I hate it. It's so confusing. Then we have Kronos. Now, again, this is a Greek titan. He was the father of Zeus, and hilariously, he cut off Uranus's testicles. Yeah, literally the titan that went to the primordial Greek god and cut his testicles off with a sickle, spawning several other gods, including Aphrodite, who, I quote, spawned from the white foam of Uranus's testicles. If that doesn't get me demonetized, I don't know what will. Moving on to the capital ships, things get a little bit more interesting here. First of all, we have the Moros. Now, Moros in Greek mythology means doom and fate, and he was the hateful personified spirit of impending doom, who drives mortals to their deadly fate. It's also said that Moros gave people the ability to foresee their death, harbinger of death, doom, and destruction. If that doesn't fit a dreadnought, I don't know what does. Coming a little bit further up, we have hubris. Now, hubris, again, is a concept, not a personification. We've talked about this earlier on. Hubris is essentially the arrogance of putting oneself before the gods. Arrogance against the gods. Very punishable in Greek mythology, and it's one of those words that's used a lot in modern terminology just to mean pride and arrogance. Brilliant name for a Lancer Dreadnought. I love it so much. I may not like the look of this ship, but I do love the name Hubris. Coming up then, we have the Ninazu. Brilliantly fun name to say. Ninazu, Mesopotamian god of the underworld, snakes, and agriculture. Now that struck me as interesting, because we're talking about the Force Auxiliary, right? The capital logistics vessel. Underworld and snakes? How does that make sense? And then I realized agriculture. Ninazu is often referred to literally as steward of the great earth. Something that makes things grow. Something that revitalizes and rejuvenates. One of the really interesting things about Mesopotamian mythology is that actually their gods of the underworld are really positive and like not your usual dark and evil guy. No, the gods of death in Mesopotamian culture were really good people. Like Nergal and Ninazu. These are like, Nergal is like a god of healing, whereas Ninazu was a god of agriculture. It all represents that cycle, and I love that concept in mythology. Then we have the Thanatos, the carrier. Now in Thanatos, in Greek mythology, Thanatos was the personification of a peaceful death. Not entirely sure that's what you get if Thanatos hop drops onto you in Nullsec. Not so sure it's a peaceful death, but it is a death. It's also where Thanos comes from in the Marvel cinematic, well, non-cinematic as well, the Marvel universe. Thanatos, Greek god of peaceful death. Finally, then we have Nyx, the Greek goddess of night, offspring of chaos itself, no father, spawned from the great chaos between worlds, also consort to Erebus, who just so happens to be her brother. Gotta love Greek mythology. And speaking of Erebus, that is the name of the Gallente Titan. Now, whereas Nyx is the goddess of night, Erebus is the god of darkness and shadows, including the darkness of the underworld that souls must pass through to reach Hades. Interestingly enough, this is, again, Erebus isn't just the Greek god. He's also, the word Erebus also is a place on the journey to the underworld. You see this with a lot of Greek mythology. Hades, obviously, a god and the place. Erebus, god and place. Tartarus, god and place. Lots of this kind of thing. Cocytus, god and place. All coming in Greek mythology there. Now, that takes us out of our combat ships. Let's see if we've got any weirdness down here on the bottom line. We can ignore Gallente Shuttle, because it's just Gallente and Shuttle. We can ignore that name. Our haulers, because the Gallente Federation have 5, because they're greedy bastards. We have 5 of them. Nereus. Now, Nereus was the Old Man of the Sea. Literally Greek mythology, Old Man of the Sea. That is Proteus. Proteus and Nereus, same thing. It's also interestingly where we get the term a Nereid from, which are like those shelled creatures that you see like ammonites and things like that. Like those spiral shelled creatures that you often see in fossils. Really cool. We then have the Cryos. Oh boy, what a fun name. Cryos literally is the Greek word meaning icy or cold. It's where the word cryogenics comes from. That's it. No further notes. Epithel. Interesting one, because again, epithel as a word doesn't exist outside of EVE Online. Epithelial does, and the epithelium is the layer of cells that cover most surfaces of the body. Epithelial cells form tissues that make up organs, such as skins and glands, and that is where the word epithelial comes from. Epithelial, literally translates, sorry, I've got my notes here, epi, meaning on, and thelia, meaning nipple. Consequently, epithelium literally means the aggregation of a cell covering the surface of the nipple. Of the nipple. Yeah. I think this ship's a bit of a boob, if I'm honest. Moving on. Miasmos, the act of defiling, defilement, or pollution. It's where the word miasma comes from, which literally kind of means like bad air. Yeah. Not sure what I can say about this. It's a hauler called Bad Air. I mean, certainly it gives the image of a big polluting truck, but this is in space. There is no air. No further notes. Finally, the Iteron Mark V. Again, Iteron, where the hell did they choose the name Iteron? Iterons are directly repeated DNA sequences which play an important role in the regulation of plasmid copy number in bacterial cells. Now, I can read that from Wikipedia. I can't tell you what it means. That's biology far advanced into what I studied in biology. And I literally did a medical degree. Well, forensic medical degree. Forensic chemistry and pathology. Yeah. Why they named a hauler after that, I don't know. But they did. Not only did they name a hauler after it, apparently they named 4 haulers after it, and then a 5th one, because we're looking at the Mark V here. So there was clearly an Iteron Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, and Mark 4. Interestingly, the only ship in Eve that actually has a mark directly in its name. Don't know why. It just does. Coming up to the transport ships, then, we have a Viator. A Viator, in Latin, is a person who travels. Grats CCP. Great name. Really creative. What should we call our hauler? What should we call our hauler? Well, says CCP, it's a Gallente hauler, and we like Latin words for Gallente. So let's call it Viator. Oh, that sounds awesome. What does that mean? Person who travels. I guess it's accurate. I can't deny the accuracy of the terminology. Just the creativity. Moving on, the Oscitor. Oscitor, not Occator, not Oxetor, Oscitor. Both of those C's come out as an S. Now, Oscitor in Greek mythology was an assistant to the Roman goddess Ceres. So not Greek mythology, sorry, Roman mythology. The goddess Ceres, who again is your kind of agriculture and love and fertility goddess. Oscitor himself is not a god. He is an assistant to a god. Why that's a hauler? I don't know. It is. But if you think any of the Gallente names have been questionable up until now, let's consider the obelisk. Now, I did a lot of diving into this because when I first looked into this, I thought this makes no sense at all. Maybe there's something I'm missing. An obelisk, after all, is literally a tall, pointed pillar. Comes from the Greek word of obeliskos. Maybe there's something else that, obelisk means. Maybe there is a meaning I am unfamiliar with. No. I couldn't find a damn thing. Obelisk is just a tall, thin, pointy pillar. And you know what? When I look at this ship, I definitely think tall, thin, and pointy. CCP, what the hell were you thinking of when you named this an obelisk? I genuinely don't get it. That, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the most egregious name in the entirety of the the Eve ship tree. Not only does it make no sense in the terms of what is an obelisk? Oh, it's a hauler. What's that got to do with a big pointy stone thing? It doesn't even look like an obelisk. They picked a name out of a hat and just went with it. Finally, then, we have the jump freighter, Anshar. This, again, I keep saying this is interesting. I really enjoyed this. Again, we're going back into Mesopotamian culture. Anshar was the Mesopotamian god regarded as primordial king of the gods. Now, you'd think that makes him the big guy in Mesopotamian culture. No, he was barely worshipped. His entire role in Mesopotamian culture was just creating the gods, at which point he was done. No point worshipping someone whose job is done, right? Congrats, you did the thing. Not going to sit here and build temples and shrines to you when you've done the thing and you're not doing anything else for us. So he was regarded as the father of Anu, and his name literally means the whole heaven. I just really like that in Mesopotamian culture, it's about what the gods do for you. And as I said, the fact that their underworld gods are also really positive forces, and it's all about cycles. So therefore, Anshar, who's no longer part of the cycle, he's done the thing, he's stepped away, doesn't need worshipping anymore. He did the thing. But that meaning of the whole heaven, Yeah, it's a jump freighter. What can it carry? The whole heaven. Where can it go? The whole heaven. That works, and that almost makes up for the fact that the freaking obelisk looks nothing like an obelisk, and the word obelisk means nothing to do with hauling or traveling in any way, shape, or form. God, this ship tree. This ship tree is simultaneously some of the coolest things and some of the worst things. I still, in my head, look at the interceptors and assault frigates in the Gallente ship tree and weep slightly. The fact that we have Tyrannus being the Celtic god of thunder, and then we have Ishkur being the Mesopotamian god of thunder. Why are these different types of ships? Especially when the other one of each of those is Enyo, goddess of war, and Ares, goddess of war. Like, seriously, why didn't we call the assault frigates the Ares and the Enyo, and then have the interceptors as the Tyrannus and the Ishkur? That would have made so much sense. You'd have both the thunder gods, thunder and lightning, very, very frightening me, Galileo, and high-speed stuff, right, as the interceptors. And then assault frigates, which are tough and punchy, both being named after gods of war. Am I right? Or am I just being crazy here? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. And again, if you do have the time, let me know which of these is your favorite name. Do you agree with me about some of these? Do you know something I don't about some of these names? I would love to know. This was a lot of fun to research and go through, but my God, it's just irritating that some of these words are just Brutex. Hey, it's a brute. What are we going to call it? Brutex. Okay, well done. What are we going to call the transport ship? Viator, person who travels. Cool. Dominix. It dominates. Cool. And then we're just going to completely misspell execor. We're going to completely misspell malice. And, then you get ones like Catalyst, which is just the greatest name for a destroyer ever when you break it down. CC, please. Why? You've got some of the best names in EVE in this ship tree and some of the least effort and worst names, nonsensical names in the entirety of the game. Oh my God, I can't believe you've done this. Why? Anyway, folks, thank you for watching right the way through to the end. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.